Well, thank you for joining us for our second regular public safety update. And we've changed the venue here today. There's a training going on in the training room, so appreciate the flexibility here. But as we said, we want to do these regular updates to make sure that we're keeping track at a regular basis about what's happening here in South Bend. Be able to share and go into some deeper dives into what's going on and what we're working on, and share information that we have that can be helpful. Also share events that are coming up. So we'll move to today's agenda. Similar to last time, we don't have any big announcements today, but we do have some updates and elaborations of things we've talked about in the past. We'll obviously go through the data review of what's going on, particularly with gun violence. And this is something I know whenever there's a wave of incidents, there's a tendency to come and say, well, gun violence is going up. And what we'll see in the data is that gun violence is still higher than we'd like, but it hasn't gone up year to date compared to last year. And if you recall from our last update, last year's was down from 2021 was down from 2020. So we know that when there's waves of incidents, there's a perception that gun violence is always increasing. That's just not the data will tell us that's not always the case. It had been going up in the years past, but as of late, fortunately, we've at least seen it plateau, perhaps come down a little bit. So that's somewhat good news. Of course, these are statistics, and every one of these incidents has a story. And some of the things we've seen so far this year are very unique circumstances that we will have to take into account with what we can do as a city to address them, and as a community, really, because it comes down to in many of these cases two things that don't seem to be going well. One, fights on social media. And two, having guns readily accessible when you do get in arguments with each other. So those are things we've got to work on. And then, of course, you've heard Chief and others talk about the change coming later this summer in July, where the permit system has been dismantled by our state legislatures and taking away that tool from our law enforcement to get illegal guns and violent offenders off the streets. Then go into some of the strategies and programs, and with the summary of some upcoming events and engagement opportunities. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Chief and to go through some of the numbers and where we are.
All right. Thanks, Mayor. Just a reiteration these are commonly FAQs. So we're kind of doing FAQ answers. This mostly from the media, but quite a bit of our community as well keep asking these questions. So that's why we're doing these public safety updates that the mayor put out. Might as well talk to everybody in person instead of going to our transparency hub and reading it and trying to decipher. This gives a little bit better perspective. And so far so good. This is our second one. And I'll move through this. So regarding homicide investigations, just as a reminder, we took over October 15th of 2021. Since we took over, we had 12 homicide investigations. Those are all individual incidents. There have been 14 victims within those 12 incidents. Right now we have 6 that resulted, who have been charged and arrests have been made. 6 remain under investigation, and all but 1 have a suspect identified. And I'm confident that we're awfully close on that one. I won't go into what that one is. Also, as a reminder, we inherited 56 cases just from the past 10 years from the former Metro Homicide Unit. And so we are working our way backwards, trying to revisit every family member or somebody that we can make contact with to let them know that we will get there. But as you know, you're looking at the 12 incidents we've had, and most of them recently. That is very time-consuming physically and mentally for our officers, and that's unfortunately it's not going to change like tomorrow. Hopefully we don't have any more and we can all get caught up, and maybe praying that will be the end of it. But within those 56 cases, we have 2 of those cold cases that we are going to be presenting to the prosecutor within the next couple weeks or so. So we've gotten some very very good cooperation and collaboration with the prosecutor's office. We actually have some prosecutors on hand that have been intimate in these current cases, as well as the previous unresolved cases that we've had. So we obviously look forward to continuing with that, and I'm going to let Lieutenant Kayla Miller unpack the rest of this and maybe give a little bit more in-depth perspective as to what these look like, or maybe expound further.
So of those 6 that still remain under investigation, as Chief said, 2 of them have been presented and we're still in that process. We have another one that's scheduled to be presented here soon. The 5th one has got a suspect that has been developed, and we are getting closer to that. And then we have another one that, while the suspect is not named yet on our end, we do have viable leads that are progressing very well. To reiterate, of those 56 cases from the last 10 years that we've picked up from the Metro Homicide Unit, those cases we have actually been collaborating with Michiana Crime Stoppers to feature some of those cases. So we'll talk about that and move into the Michiana Crime Stoppers segment, which is that there's a new weekly segment that we are doing where we feature a cold case or an unsolved case, and we're working to look at those 56 cases first. When Michiana Crime Stoppers is contacted by other agencies that have cold cases, they'll be working on those as well. We also have an update from our last session in which we talked about our increased rewards. So we have an increased reward for tips leading to the arrest or solving of a homicide case, and that reward was up to $2,500 from the previous $1,000. And then we talked briefly in January about a program that we were going to look at, which is called Victory Over Violence, and that is specifically surrounding gun violence. So the cases that are gun violence, whether it be shootings or shots fired, or someone who is just in possession of a firearm that's a felony, is an automatic $1,000 reward. And that program was implemented February 1st, and we had a press conference for that. And since that implementation, we have had 4 Victory Over Violence rewards that have been paid out and 6 firearms recovered due to that information. Pass it on.
I think I'm obviously going to popcorn that one to you with the Real-Time Crime Center.
All right. Well, you know, in the state of city a few weeks ago, we mentioned the need for and the time being ripe for establishing a real-time crime center here in South Bend, and of course we had council members and members of the police department, members of our GBI team, and members of the administration head out to Detroit to see what they had and what they called the Project Greenlight. There are other models in other cities, and here you see some best practices from Atlanta, Cleveland, Lexington, and Detroit. And so, you know, the idea here is to utilize technology and capitalize on partnerships with businesses and residents, even to come together and form, be able to have the information to have a real-time crime center, which means that we have data coming in real time, and we can have insight onto crime unfolding in South Bend. Some of the details are, you know, there's a lot of pieces that'll go into this. You know, we began implementation of flock cameras, not just in the city of South Bend, but partnering with the county and city of Mishawaka also have implemented that. So part of these are right-of-way cameras. Part of these will be cameras in public spaces, in dense areas. But then there will also be these partnerships with businesses and residents that'll get underway. And then, of course, having all of this has to speak. You know, this is a lot of data coming in. It's in some ways becomes an IT issue more than even a police issue, figuring out the data storage and the rest. And of course, this will, like most data storage these days, it will be on a cloud server. So those details are being worked at. You know, we still aim to have things, you know, at least a pilot going by the end of this calendar year. And you know, I don't know if either chiefs want to give a little more information on where we are and what they see.
Yeah, Chief Skippins will here shortly. I'm going to jump into some of the announcements first. I want to kind of stay on schedule here because I know that Dan's going to go pretty much in depth. Just a reminder, today's the last day of school for our South Bend schools. I know that we've had several officers, including Division Chief Crit was out there in some of the school zones today, making people aware that you need to be paying attention everywhere, but especially in school zones. You don't get a do-over whether that bullet leaves a gun or whether you look away from that steering wheel for however many quarter of a second that it may be. That's all it takes to have tragedy happen. We'll tell you though, even though that you won't see as many school buses, there will still be summer school, there will still be activity buses and some of those school buses. That starts June 6th. So just, we want residents obviously to be aware that the kids are going to be out there playing. It's going to be, even next week, it's supposed to be, you know, in the 90s next week, and kids are going to be out of school, so they're going to tend to be outside more. And kids are going to be kids, and they may not pay attention, chase the ball between two parked cars, or go after, you know, one of their pets that may have gotten away. That's usually when disaster happens. So I'll probably be cliche several times. You got to keep an eye on our kids, not rely on somebody else to do it. But when somebody's driving a 4,000-pound car down the street, even if it's 2 miles an hour, that's enough to do, you know, tragic damage. Also with that brings out more people in general, more bicycles, more mopeds, more motorcycles. Judging one headlight, if somebody doing something foolish on a motorcycle at whatever speed it may be, it's very hard to judge from a vehicle. I don't care who you are. Hopefully we won't see the uptick in serious crashes or worse, but we just need to all be aware, whether day or night, there's going to be more motorcycles, mopeds, bicycles, and pedestrians in general. So let's use our heads out there. That's what we need to be doing. And then lastly, from that perspective, our parks are open. They have been open. We've been seeing some issues in some of our parks. There are rules in our parks. They are to prevent injury and harm to people, but there's also some decorum issues, to say the least. Rude, disrespectful harassment of people who are there also trying to enjoy the park should not be happening. Somebody is going to get seriously hurt or injured if we as a community, we as parents, are not keeping a watchful eye on our kids. It is our business as parents to keep eyes on our kids 24/7, 365. That's what our job is. We had them, we claim them, we own them, and we need to make sure that they're safe and they're not doing bad things to other people. It's really that simple. Then flipping over to, as a reminder, because we hear it all the time, well, kids have nothing to do. There are plenty to do. And I will tell you, just from our perspective, we have the Police Athletic League, and our summer camps are starting, coincidentally, also on June 6th. We have typically, just in our PAL summer program, about 200, 250 kids. We're projecting that right now. We should have at least that. I know that COVID for the last couple of years kind of slowed that down a bit, but we still had great turnout. We still run our PAL program, boxing, and everything else through the entire year. And we're between 650 and 850 kids every year that go through. So when people say, my kids have nothing to do, here's something to do. So, and that entails everything. We have all sports, tennis, swimming, basketball, kickball, volleyball, you name it, all those things are there. And this is a great opportunity, not just with police officers, but we have kids who were kids at one time that have come back and now are coaching and mentoring, tutoring. All those things are available, so we would absolutely implore people to bring their kids there. It's not a drop-off zone to babysit. The kids will be active and doing things that kids should be, not in the basement playing video games. Here's an opportunity for them to get some physical exercise and interact with each other and officers as well. So we get a bonus out of all of that. Just quite simply, human beings being human beings, that's what we need to get back to.
All right, from there I'm going to transition us into a data review from announcements into some of our data. You'll see many of these slides look the same as the last time we met. We're keeping the same template. We added a few others, but we're going to go over some of the data now. Thank you to our Innovation and Technology Department for analyzing the data and updating this so we can give this presentation. 2022 compared to 2021 year to date, as you can see, our gun violence incidents are down. So I gave a quick snapshot of what that means. Gun violence incidents are everything from shootings to robberies to persons to businesses. You have shots fired in the air, intimidation, things of that nature involving a gun that are reported to the police that have a victim. Structures struck by bullets, from vehicles to houses that are occupied, all of those fall into that category. So across the board we are seeing, as the mayor said, trending in the right direction. Moving on to our criminally assaulted shooting victims, that is slightly down, 43 compared to 46 year to date from last year. And as the mayor also pointed out, from 2020 to 2021, we saw a 10% reduction in that category, so still trending in the right direction. Firearms recovered, those are illegally possessed firearms. Last year it was 208, this year 176. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm sure some could argue either way on that one, but it does show that our officers are out there putting in the work to remove guns from those who illegally possess them. We can slide to the next breakdown, which is a gun violence breakdown. The middle section I'm going to focus on first here, and that's non-fatal versus fatal. And as you can see, the fatal is listed there in orange, and then in blue would be our non-fatal. The trend from 2018 to 2020 had us going upward, and you can see that trend on the bar graph heading back down in the right direction. Just below that one is a breakdown of our group member involved. I spoke about that last time and what that means. Those are identified violent group members and gang members through our intel here at the police department, incidents involving gun violence in the past. That's how individuals are deemed to be group member involved or violent group member involved. They make up a majority of our shootings. You see in the pie chart that 61% of our shootings this year so far have been GMI. And then we have a breakdown for our districts, our council districts within the city. The darker the shade, the more the gun violence, our shootings in this case, and then the lighter the shade, the fewer. I think that's all the points I'm going to hit on for this one, and we can slide on to our strategies and programs. But if you have questions on those, we can come back to those at the end. The first one I'm going to talk about is ShotSpotter Connect. I went into great detail last time. I felt like I was speaking quite a bit on this and lost my voice afterwards. So I'll just give a quick overview this time. It's a software we're utilizing. This makes us more efficient in resource deployment. And so it looks at historic gun data. It looks at all crime, all crime for the last 3 years historically. And then it also looks at what's trending for the past few weeks. And it deploys our resources, our officers who work in patrol, to spend time in those locations. That's throughout the entire city. All districts are covered with ShotSpotter Connect, and these are called missions that the officers are fulfilling. And so moving into accountability there, a big piece for us is our supervisors, our sergeants, and our lieutenants are in real time able to check on their officers working during a shift to see that they're fulfilling these missions. In the past, we didn't have that before. A supervisor would have to go out to these areas themselves to verify that officers are spending time where they need to be. So the accountability measure from ShotSpotter Connect has proven to be a success. We can move on to the next slide, which shows some of our measures with ShotSpotter Connect. Over 15,000 Connect missions since October 1st. Last time I talked about we launched it in the summertime, but it was a bit of a beta. We had to fix some glitches within the system, and we feel comfortable about the data being accurate from October 1st on. So that's what we're showing to you today. There are approximately 72 missions per day. Officers are spending per officer 20 minutes in a mission zone per officer. And then as you can see, we're at 90% completion of those missions that have been rolled out through ShotSpotter Connect. That is above what we are even asking for from our patrol shifts. So we know that we have good buy-in from our patrol officers, because that is considerably above the minimum standards that we're asking for. So moving forward, we're moving into about a year of using ShotSpotter Connect October 1st with reliable data. We'll be able to tell in looking at our violent crime, our gun crime, and crime overall, is it reducing? Is it having the effect that we want it to? Is resource deployment working well with ShotSpotter Connect? And then we can assess if this is a tool we're going to continue to use. But so far, so good.
Can I just one thing, because I know there was some questions that came up from people offline. Actually, some reporters were asking afterwards. Just to put that into perspective, if we have one area of town, say it's a 4-block area, that has 20 burglaries, and another area that has 20 burglaries, but that area has a firearm involved in something, that area will kick off an alert for a priority mission as opposed to the other that just has 20 burglars with no firearms. not going to get neglected, because if we can deal with that and we don't have any more issues with firearms, that will still be an area that we look at. So if it's northeast side of town, say we have 8 blocks, 4 have burglaries, so do the other 4, but that one has a gun, that will be our priority area. Does that, hopefully that clarifies some things. I know that was asked before.
And then moving into our next strategy that we're utilizing, the mayor talked about Flock. So Flock LLC is a company that provides license plate readers. They're stationary. So a great strategy that we've deployed in our peer visit to Detroit. They're just now moving towards Flock cameras. The company is out of Indianapolis, and they've aggressively are moving through Indiana and southwest Michigan. Most departments in our area now have Flock cameras. And as the mayor said, we combined with the county to look at utilizing these cameras on major thoroughfares to keep our community safe. So individuals that enter into the city of South Bend, if they're on a hit list for terrorism or an Amber Alert or a suspect in a shooting in other cities, which we've already had that occur, then our officers are pushed with a hit response to their MDTs while they're out there working. So it's helping to keep our community safe. But one of the biggest things that we've seen from Flock is an investigatory tool. We have some data, I think should be up next. And so motor vehicle thefts, we've recovered 41 vehicles since we began using Flock, and that's from August 1st of 2021. Aggravated assaults and firearms, those are those firearm offenses that I was talking to you about earlier that fit into that overall gun violence category. 12 cases where Flock has benefited us and helped us produce a suspect or removed a suspect from the list. Homicide investigations, you see 7 there. There are 2 that I know of through working with the detective bureau that if we didn't have Flock cameras, we would not have been able to present and gain charges from the prosecutor's office. And then wanted persons. Those are the type of incidents that officers are getting pushed hits from Flock. They're not getting, this individual doesn't have a driver's license and just drove through this area. These are people wanted on warrants. Our CIBs, crime information bulletins, are out there that they're a suspect in a crime, that the police need to speak with them. Those are the type of things that are getting sent to officers' MDTs through Flock. We're utilizing these cameras on major thoroughfares, and we're looking at expanding. We've added some more cameras just recently. Now moving into another priority, because this is important with resource deployment, is officer recruitment. Our numbers have dwindled down to 219 at this point. And looking at our peak within recent times, we were at 243, so you see what we're having to deal with is to increase that back up to the numbers we had before so that we can actually put a larger dent into violent crime. We've hired 17 this year. Some of those are recruits, some of those are at the academy now. We are looking at 2 laterals who are at the very end of their hiring process, so in June they'll be wrapping up and we're looking to swear them in July. 14 individuals have departed from our department in the same time period, so we're slightly above where we were last year. We dipped down at like 215 last year. This year we actually hit 214 for officers, but with our new swear-ins we're back up to 219. We've pursued several different areas of advertisement, starting our campaign Push for Recruitment that began extensively in October of last year. But we were out there as soon as COVID restrictions were lifted in the summertime, hitting universities, colleges, job fairs. Training and recruitment's made up of 5 individuals, so it's a small unit. But we utilize officers throughout the department that are interested in improving our numbers, our overall officer numbers. So that's a diverse group, the diversity within race, gender. We put them out there talking to individuals homegrown to get them to apply, and hopefully they'll become candidates for the police department. On that note, moving into part of our recruitment is our diversity push. So we have some numbers here looking back at January 1st of 2021, identifying that we need a department that is more like the makeup of the community that we serve. So looking for a diverse group, a pool that we can select from for our hiring process, and you can see we've made improvements across the board there. From female officers applying, or potential female officers applying, and becoming officers, that's the smallest uptick, but when you look down at African American and Hispanic, we're up in all of those categories. Looking to improve those across the board, researching other departments and what they're doing for diversity recruitment. Those who have had success are in the 10 to 15% range, so we're going to push for that same thing and hope to accomplish that in the upcoming years. One last thing that I have would be our prospect days. We're pursuing another recruitment strategy. This one will take place in the summertime. We have some dates coming up for you and a link to that. So 2 dates, one in June and one in July so far, where those who have applied for jobs to be police officers in South Bend, we have a pool right now of about 40. They'll be able to come out on a specific day in June when we contact them, and they'll finish a majority of the hiring process all in one day. There's about 6 major steps, 6 or 7, and we're covering about 5 of them all in one day. It'll be a long day of 7 to 8 hours that this prospect day will take place, but we're hopeful that this will speed up the process and get even more officers hired and into the academy in August. And if not, if the academy's filled up, then we'll push them through January 1st of 2023. Now we'll open it up to any questions that we may have on what we've covered. Yes?
Okay. Hi. I had a few questions about, one of them was about the stat. With the 72-day average with the ShotSpotter, does that mean then 72 times a day there's a sound, a gunfire sound? Is that? Or
With ShotSpotter Connect, I'm sorry, so ShotSpotter is the company, they provide us with gun detection technology.
Right.
But they also provide the software that is Connect. So no, that's not related. The 72 would be missions the officers are sent out on based on historic crime and recent crime. So that's where they need to spend some time because they've had some crime issues.
Got it. And then in terms of numbers being down, like recruitment, are there any exit polls? What's the main reason that the number's down?
Yeah, we've slowly started to do that, but most of it is retirement. Officers that have 20 years on and are vested and are at or near 52 years of age so that they can draw their pension.
And the last one that I have is, can any of you guys provide any updates about the Alexis Morales case?
We're not going to talk about any open investigations.
Sorry.
I just had a question about recruitment being down. Where would you find, or where would cuts, like what would be the first to be cut with, like if you don't see the numbers that you would like to see?
Well, first, I mean, I think we want to say recruitment is up.
Oh, okay.
We're going through a transition, and this is true, this is true in a lot of areas, but particularly in law enforcement. We had accumulated when I took office, we had 33% of the department was eligible for retirement. They were eligible with 20 years, full pension, and could leave at any time. Our department has gotten younger now with all these retirements going through, and now I think we're down to maybe a quarter instead of a third that would be eligible for retirement at any time. The level at which we're recruiting and replacing, how many are we on track
17 to 14, so 14 departures this year, 17 hires.
17 hires, I mean, so you can start to say out of 240, how many years would that be to replace? And so we're recruiting above every 20-year replacement schedule if everyone finished their full 20 years. So recruitment, we're doing, we're moving, getting more people in, but it's a challenge because we have had this structural issue of having a lot of officers eligible for retirement. And what we're finding too is there are some generational differences where the officers that are retiring now, many of them went well beyond 20 years, where some of the younger generations, when they get to 20 years, they've said, I've done my service and I'm going to go perhaps pursue another career or something else. So there are a number of things at play here, but I just wanted to clarify recruitment. All of the efforts of recruitment, we are seeing more, we have seen progress there. Unfortunately, it's just been, we've been kind of treading water because the structural change with the retirements.
Sorry if I misspoke on that. Mayor had to clarify for me.
I think even to piggyback, I'm sorry.
25 new hires last year, we're on pace for 30 this year, so we're improving upon our pool by our advertisement and recruiting.
Yeah, and so to piggyback on some things that the mayor said, I just got back. I left Sunday and just returned last night from the academy. So some of the things that I was looking at, what were they doing? What could we be doing? All that kind of stuff. So not just talking to the officers that we have down there from South Bend, but other officers as well. Just trying to get a perspective of what generationally they would like to see, what was the thing that got them interested, what is keeping them interested, things like that. But I will tell you that despite my 35 years, this is probably a trend-setting amount of people that we have recruited and gotten in. When an officer goes to retire, we may be lucky to, if they're in the drop program, deferred retirement, that we would know 1, 2, or 3 years in advance when they're going to leave. Sometimes we don't have that. Sometimes it's just an officer's report. Actually, a lot of times it's just an officer's report saying, here's your 2-week notice. So now we have to scramble to try to get that position filled. Even though we have positions left to try to keep filling, it doesn't always work out that way. And we're only allotted a certain amount of positions, whether it's ILEA, the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy, or NILEA, which is the Northern Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. We're only allotted certain positions. So if we have 8 people retire, I may only have 4, maybe if I'm lucky, 5 positions down at ILEA where I can put officers in. And it's that caterpillar effect that we're experiencing. So it's a year to a year and a half to get somebody through the academy, trained, post-basic, field training that we have here, and then out on the streets. So there's always going to be that unfortunate lag. We will catch up. The mayor's got an analytical mind, and he's got some predictions that he gave me, and so far most of them have come true, so we'll rely on that.
We try not to make forecasts,
Yeah,
especially when we're recording, but because that can come back to haunt you. But like I said, we're recruiting at a rate that is we expect the average tenure, even with younger generations. We're recruiting at a rate, if we keep this up, we will get back to full strength in the next few years.
The shooting violence numbers presented seem a little down a little bit year to date. I think it was 3 victims fewer this year. Is there anything in particular you can attribute that to? Any trends? It seems more significant when you compare to 2020, I guess 2 years to date. Any attribution on that side of it?
Yeah, I think a combination of all the strategies that we're utilizing, from ShotSpotter Connect to Flock, and identifying suspects and apprehending people. I think if we looked at those numbers, and Kayla maybe can provide this next time, that the apprehensions on shooting suspects, and we already did the homicides, but just overall gun violence cases that we're seeing, what percentage of those are getting charged. I think that all of our strategies add towards that.
And I mean, I think anecdotally, we know the pandemic, this was across the country, we saw numbers go up, shoot up, and some of that had to do with just the inability for us. There were a couple things going on at that time, but one was, some of the other programming like GBI wasn't able to really we didn't have call-ins, we didn't have the same level of interactions that we had from our programs, much less community members, schools were closed. So just a lot of social turmoil that we saw lead to a lot of problems and upticks of incidents. So it does seem like, hopefully, and we've said this before, we hope that we've seen the high water mark of the social impacts of the pandemic. We're still going to be dealing with those social impacts for some time, but we hope that this means that we've already seen the worst impacts socially from those isolation measures.
And then on ShotSpotter Connect, I think, Chief Scott, as you mentioned that you're hoping to get a year into it to kind of judge the effectiveness of it. Is that just kind of wanting to clarify that's the case? You're not drawing any conclusions at this point in time?
Correct. Contractually, it's a 1-year contract with ShotSpotter, so going into that contract, we uncertain of how well ShotSpotter Connect would do for us. It's a new product by them as well, so very few cities have it. We went to Wilmington, North Carolina, and that's where we were able to see a demo and have a peer exchange, and so we determined that it was worth it for us to look into that technology because it gives us that ability to see that our officers are spending time where we need them to. And so far, like I said, so far so good, but we're going to continue to review it and assess that contract if it's necessary.
I think with that, Mark, as well, is the officers are immediately realizing that when they are in those mission areas, nothing is happening. Nothing bad is happening, typically, unless they're called away to have to respond somewhere else, and then we see that. But for the most part, when they're assigned and they're involved in those mission areas, which will get a lot better now because they'll be doing a lot more foot patrols, within those designated areas, but with a 15 or 20 minutes, those intervals, nothing is happening. So that's an immediate feedback, immediate response. Obviously, we're looking for the whole 43 square miles of the city that we're able to contend with. Should it be, should that be the case? But at least for right now, they're getting that immediate feedback and recognition. And I know some of the officers, I remember somebody had mentioned it to me before, is like, the big brother spying on them. No, this is absolutely a tool for them and for the supervisors. So supervisors have to run, 2, 3, 5 miles from spot to spot to make that check. We can do that real time immediately.
Is there any worry about parsing between, how much is ShotSpotter Connect and these new programs, whether it be cameras, how much are they working versus how much is it, as the mayor mentioned, kind of getting out of the pandemic mindset? I mean, I know they're both at play, I'm sure to some extent, but is there any worry about like parsing how effective one is versus the other there?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the one thing, if you look at, there's been a lot of peer-reviewed studies about crime and different approaches to addressing crime. Number of officers, proactive policing is one that peer-reviewed studies have shown. That's one that's very clear has an impact at reducing incidents. And what ShotSpotter Connect in particular is this effectively deploying our resources. We know what we really need is we need to get back to full strength. I mean, we need more officers and have that presence. But in the meantime, and even when we are, well, how can you most effectively deploy the officer time that you have? And I think, whether you're using this version or something else, you're going to have some logic to how you're deploying your resources, right? And it's going to be based off, on some level, off of crime data, right? Where are the problems happening? That's probably where, you're going to need to focus more attention. So whether it's this product or something else, we do know generally this approach works, and this has been successful for us to track it. Like you said, in some of those older peer-reviewed studies, it was all hard to figure out where were the officers at all times because we didn't have GPS we didn't have that kind of data collection. So at the very least, we know that we're doing the missions. It's 72 per day, and we do hope that. We know that does have an impact in general, and we hope that these missions in particular are having an impact.
Any concern with permitless carry starting, I believe, July 1st? How does that affect you all? How do you adapt to it?
I don't even know why I'm smiling for that. I'm obviously frustrated. I've not been shy about that. Matter of fact, I was talking to some people when I was down in Plainfield about the same thing. There may be some light here. I don't know what that entails. I do know that the lawmakers are either have gone or about to go back into session, and they're going to do some tweaking. I don't know what that's going to be. I wish it'd be a lot more than tweaking. Let's take a really serious look at this. I mean, you see what's happening not just here but around the country, and what Texas just experienced on top of everything else. Some things need to be seriously looked at. Not stomping on anybody's Second Amendment, but I think things really need to be looked at, and before making these decisions behind closed doors at 0 dark 30 that happened with this law. I'm obviously not happy personally and professionally with that, and I think that was just a bad, wrong move. I hope I'm wrong, but I've made no bones about it. If and or when bad things start to happen, that press conference ought to be with them down there, not us up here.
Yeah, and I mean, the committee, if you're looking for solutions, the committee down there found that when they had all the public testimony, they went through it, they came up with a reasonable alternative as opposed to just dismantling the permit system, and their idea was to give a provisional permit. So I don't know how long did it take us to issue a permit?
Oh, it was not long
a few days,
a couple days.
Or within a couple, let's just say at worst, a couple weeks. And they had already removed the fee from it. So they, a year or two ago, they removed the barrier of paying for this permit. And, like these, we were able to turn these around within a matter of days. But if you thought that was still too much time to wait to be able to carry a firearm, Well, the committee that was listening to the public testimony came up with a solution. We'll have a provisional permit, just like when you go to the DMV. They give you the piece of paper and they send you the license in the mail, but that piece of paper is valid for that time until you're able to get your full license. And so that was a great solution the committee came up with to address any remaining concerns. And then the decision was made at the leadership level to go back to the original language and dismantle the permit system. So, it's a broader issue. We all know that it's going to, a lot of violence is driven by people. We understand that. You got to address social and people issues, but to take the gun side of the equation completely off the table and say we're going to reverse, we're going to undo common sense, regulations or common sense background checks or common sense permitting. I don't know. We've got to get to a place where common sense can still prevail.
How does law enforcement adapt to that, provided nothing changes in special session and this, goes into effect? How do you all adapt to, trying to still keep people safe and keep illegal guns off the street when that provision is gone now?
Well, that's a good question and a tough one. We have ideas, but we don't know if they're going to work until we deploy those ideas. It's frustrating to know what we've had. It's not a matter of us, we've just gotten so used to it. That is absolutely not the case. It's not that we look forward and snatching that person that should have had a permit and get that is absolutely not the reason why. People who should not have them is the reason why we're doing it, because the people who should not have them are typically the ones who are going out and hurting other people who aren't bothering anybody in many cases. We look at everyone. This is, again, not an infringement perspective at all, but this is a first line tool, the very first page that we were able to deploy and keep people safe, including the person with that gun. Only bad things are going to happen. They're either going to fire it or get fired upon. Somebody with the ill intent. And that's what we don't want to happen to anyone.
One of my questions, which was about social media. At the very beginning, Mayor Mueller said social media fights and accessible guns made for a perfect storm for these incidents. And I'm wondering about social media surveillance, even just like public posts, looking at social media tags or anything that are public.
Yeah, so a lot of things that I won't discuss obviously are tactics and some of our surveillance or investigative measures, but I will tell you that we do have measures in place and those would not be exempt.
If I can bounce back from the question and answer portion, one of the topics Chief wanted me to go into a little bit more detail on was the real-time crime center. And I don't have a lot to cover here, but I can tell you the project's being led by the police department, Chief Lancaster, and we're looking at demos for software for that real-time crime center. So it's in the early phases. We've identified an area that works for us, crime analysts that will be needed and utilized should we move forward with this particular software. And so early phases of the project, we'll of course adhere to the mayor's deadline and we'll get something up and running this year. We had one more slide, didn't we? Did anybody cover this stuff?
The coming events, yeah.
So yeah, Saturday, June 4th, a great opportunity for engagement with law enforcement. If you're at the Sunburst, feel free to come up to our officers and talk to them. We tell our officers the same thing. Feel free to go to the public and talk to them, ask them how they're doing and have that engagement with the community. And those that are even coming to South End from outside of our community, it's a large event. Moving into June 8th, we have our monthly public crime meeting. Those are at 6:30 here at the auditorium. I believe we just fired those back up about 3 months ago, and so looking forward to having another one here in June. And then the summer prospect days that I talked about, we have the dates listed here, so we're pushing that on social media. Hope to be on the radio soon talking about our prospect days so we get an even larger applicant pool coming out on June 16th. And then August 2nd is our National Night Out Against Crime with more details to come. That's still in the phase of preparing for, and so we'll have something more for you the next time we're here.